I'd like to make a few points today regarding the city's placing of the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont on our tax rolls. This effort, if upheld by the courts, would raise for the city of Burlington approximately $2.8 million in new taxes and perhaps set a major precedent for cities and towns throughout the state in terms of their relationship to non-religious hospitals. Our city attorney's office, which in my view is one of the best municipal legal departments in New England, has made its opinion public, and it is not necessary for me at this time to restate the legal arguments. I would simply like to make a few non-legal points. As responsible city officials, one of the most important aspects of our job is to do everything that we can to protect the taxpayers of our city, many of whom do not have a lot of money. If, as our city attorney's office maintains, state law does not grant tax exemption to non-religious hospitals without a majority vote of the people, then, in my view, we would be irresponsible, if not legally culpable, to the taxpayers of Burlington not to place the medical center on the tax rolls. In my view, the property tax on homeowners is one of the most regressive and unfair forms of taxation in existence. As Burlingtonians know, as a result of state-mandated reappraisal and an unfair state aid to education distribution formula, property taxes in our city for many homeowners have risen substantially despite our efforts in the last few years to find alternatives to the property tax. Many elderly homeowners and many working people are today paying substantially more in property taxes than they did a few years ago. The Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, an institution appraised at well over $100 million, pays absolutely nothing to the city of Burlington in taxes, nothing to the city of Burlington in lieu of tax payments, and nothing to the city of Burlington for the services that they receive. Not to provide tax relief for our homeowners by substantially broadening our tax base in accordance with state law would, in my view, be absolutely irresponsible to the property taxpayers of the city of Burlington. As public policy, notwithstanding state law, is it in fact a good idea to tax the medical center? Does it make sense? My response is that if our lawyers are right in arguing that the medical center can receive tax exemption only by winning majority support for that position from the people of Burlington, then the state law provides us with exactly the right process by which we can have that debate. The state law does not say, as we interpret it, that the hospital cannot receive tax exemption. It doesn't say that. The Medical Center Hospital of Vermont can receive tax exemption. The law says that the people of a community who are providing that tax exemption have to vote for it and voluntarily support it. If the medical center can successfully make the case to the people of Burlington that it is in the public interest that the medical center not pay taxes, and if they can convince the people of Burlington that the property taxpayers of the city should help subsidize that institution, then the medical center will retain their tax-exempt status and not have to pay taxes. If, on the other hand, after hearing all sides of the debate, the people are not convinced that MCHV deserves tax-exempt status, then they will not get it. As it happens, I think that that process articulated by state law is an extremely sensible one. If citizens wish to pay higher taxes to subsidize a tax-exempt institution, they certainly have the right to make that choice. But that choice should not be forced upon them. It is a choice that should be voluntarily made. The state law, as we interpret it, provides an excellent mechanism for that issue to be resolved, which is a democratic election. In passing, I would mention that over 40% of the property in this city of Burlington is tax exempt, and that the largest tax exempt institutions, of course, are the University of Vermont and the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont. In addition, I would mention that in March of 1986, the people of Burlington voted for a charter change which would have done away with the tax exempt status of both UVM and the Medical Center and would have required them to pay 25% of what they are appraised at. 60% of the people of the city of Burlington voted for that charter change. Unfortunately, the state legislature ignored the will of the people of Burlington and did not support us. There is another issue that I would like to briefly touch upon, and that is the appropriateness for one community, in this case, the city of Burlington, to provide close to a $3 million subsidy for the medical center, an institution which is clearly a regional and statewide facility. The medical center is an excellent hospital providing high-quality care to people from throughout the state of Vermont, from throughout New Hampshire, and from throughout New York State. Given the regional nature of this institution, is it fair that the people of only one city are asked to subsidize the hospital's operations? Clearly, if a public subsidy is warranted, wouldn't it make more sense for that subsidy to be spread out to all taxpayers in the state of Vermont? And I would remind you that recently in the state of Connecticut, for example, the state legislature voted to increase from 25% to 40% the amount of help it provides to a community which hosts hospitals and institutions of higher learning. If the city is successful in receiving the $2.8 million in additional revenue, how would I recommend that those funds be utilized? First of all, none of that money has been appropriated or placed into the budget because of our expectations of a lengthy court battle. The city does not spend money that it does not have, and we will not have that money until, in all probability, we receive a judgment from the Vermont Supreme Court. So once again, none of this hopefully anticipated revenue has been appropriated. That, of course, would be irresponsible. Secondly, there is a process in the city by which the school board, the major recipient of city tax dollars, appropriates its share of tax revenue, while the mayor and the board of aldermen go through their budget process for municipal expenditures. Obviously, it is much too early to speculate what might happen in terms of that process, but I don't think that it would be inappropriate now to give some of my general thoughts on that subject. At this point, my thoughts are, number one, that a significant portion of that money should be returned to the taxpayers of Burlington by lowering the city's tax rate. Reappraisal has hurt many of our homeowners, and we should do our best to provide tax relief for them. Secondly, money should be set aside to prevent future tax increases, certainly for the next year. I could not understand why there would be any reason for a tax increase, and possibly for the next 2 years. Thirdly, it would be my recommendation that a portion of this money be placed into a special emergency health care fund for Burlingtonians who are having a hard time at present paying their skyrocketing medical bills. There are many people throughout our city, and in fact throughout the state of Vermont and throughout this country, who have no health insurance or only partial health insurance and are unable to get the health care that they require. This fund could be of some help to them. Finally, I want to touch upon for a moment the hospital's claim that taxing the MCHV would drive up the cost of health care. As you all know, the skyrocketing cost of health care is a very complex issue, and in fact is an issue that this administration is right now in the process of studying very thoroughly. We have some very strong thoughts as to why health care throughout America, throughout Vermont, and in our own area, is skyrocketing. Several points, however, should be made regarding the medical center's specific claims. Number one, the medical center's budget for 1987 is over $100 million. Their taxes to the city of Burlington would be less than $3 million, less than 3% of their total expenditures. When the medical center pays its bills, I am sure that it doesn't ask the telephone company to provide free service to them, and I'm sure that it doesn't ask the drug companies from whom they buy drugs to provide free drugs to them, and I'm sure that the doctors who work at the medical center do not provide their services free of charge, and I am sure that the construction companies who build the new facilities at the medical center do not do their work without being compensated. Somehow, however, when the city asked for payments for fire protection, for police protection, to help us pave our streets and our sidewalks, for snow removal, and for all of the other programs that the medical center benefits from, somehow when we make that request, we are the bad guys who are driving up the cost of health care. I see a certain inconsistency there. During the last several years, to the best of our understanding, the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont has run up a cumulative profit of approximately $10 million. With that profit margin, a fair question might be asked as to why, in fact, the costs of hospital care have not declined, or why, in the future, tax payments to the city could not be folded in to that very generous profit margin. Thirdly, in truth, it is very difficult for the citizens of the state of Vermont to get a handle on the medical center's budgetary process and their legitimate needs, because as a private institution, they meet behind closed doors and do not invite the public in to observe or to participate in that budget process. How much money are they paying for administration purposes? How much do their administrators make? How much do their public relations people make? How much do their lawyers make? What do they pay their doctors, etc.? The truth is, we don't know the answer to that question. And it's very hard for us to get an honest handle on their budgetary needs until that information becomes public. I would simply remind the people of our area that 6 years ago, the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont decided to expand its facilities to the tune of approximately $60 million. And at that time, many of us raised very serious concerns about the impact of that expansion on skyrocketing healthcare costs. But at that time, the medical center did not pay terribly much attention to that concern. Thank you.
Are you saying that the medical center, I mean, you talk about them paying for services and contributing, you know, how this community is sort of supporting the regional, statewide healthcare facility. Do you acknowledge that the medical center also provides benefits to this same community, like lots of workers who spend money in bars and restaurants and help support the local economy?
Sure, and so does IBM, and so does General Electric, and so do the shops in downtown Burlington provide benefits. The question and the point that I made is whether or not it is appropriate for one city to subsidize the operations of the medical center when that institution provides health care for people throughout the entire state of Vermont, throughout New Hampshire, and throughout New York. Why only one city? Why should one city and the people of one city, many of whom are low-income people, provide that subsidy? And the point that I was making is that if people in Montpelier, in the legislature, believe that the medical center warrants public subsidy, that's an interesting debate. Clearly, it should not be only one city that provides that subsidy. Our neighboring towns receive quite as many benefits from that institution as do the citizens of the city of Burlington, and that was my point on that issue.
You mentioned the inconsistency in the hospital's argument. I think that they would make the same claim with your argument that you've been talking a lot lately about the affordability of health care.
Yeah.
And to then turn around and tax someone you have no control over where they will get that savings. They're going to tack it on their patient bills.
Well, that's a good point, Mark, and I attempted to address that point, and this is my response to that question. I think everybody, including the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, will recognize that the escalating cost of healthcare is in fact a very complex issue. Okay, I recognize it, and I know that they recognize it. The point that I am making is that when you look at the escalating cost of healthcare, there are dozens of factors that have to be looked at. In my view, for example, I would say the major critique of American medicine today, including the medical center, is that by and large, hospitals are run as businesses. And I believe that despite the fact they may call themselves nonprofit, there are a heck of a lot of people up there making a heck of a lot of money, okay? And I think that's a national problem. The point that I'm trying to make is that the medical center comes down and they say, well, gee, if we pay taxes to Burlington, we have additional expenses, is going to drive up the cost of health care. And my point is, yeah, that may be true. But you know what? When you pay your telephone bills to the phone company, you're driving up the cost of health care. When you pay sums of money to construction companies who are building new facilities, they are not doing the work for nothing. You are driving up the cost of health care. To the best of my knowledge, your doctors up there are not working for free. That in other words, to run a facility, it costs a good deal of money. And the point that I'm making is, why should low-income homeowners in the city of Burlington be asked to subsidize fire protection to the medical center? Now, fire protection is a very important issue. Obviously, everybody knows that in a hospital area, we have got to have a well-staffed fire department to protect that institution. It costs us a lot of money to do it. We're proud to do it. But we think that the medical center should pay for that service as part of their general tax payments.
But how is taxing them going to get at the goal that you want to accomplish, which is to keep healthcare affordable?
Then that's a good question also. Mark, that's exactly right. There are two debates. There are precisely two debates. One debate is the issue of fair taxation.
Right.
What is fair taxation? Should low-income homeowners in the city of Burlington be asked to subsidize the operations of a private hospital that meets behind closed doors? I think not. The other question that should be asked is, how do we tackle the very serious problem of high and escalating healthcare costs? And that is an issue that this administration intends to spend a great deal of time and energy on. I've begun to talk, I in fact will be going to Canada within the next couple of weeks. It's an issue that during the summer you're going to see a lot of activity on. But I would suggest to you that they are separate issues, not different.
But how are you helping to get at the question of affordability of health care by taxing?
We are going to be getting to the issue of the affordability of health care in many other respects. Okay? In other words, there are a whole lot...
You're not helping the problem.
Mark, that is exactly the same argument that is raised regarding the University of Vermont. Okay? As some of you remember, a year and a half ago, we placed on the ballot a question whether or not we should do away with UVM's tax-exempt status. And people said, well, gee, I thought you were in favor of inexpensive college education. I am. So then you sit down and you say, how do we develop in the state of Vermont affordable higher education? And there are a lot of issues to be resolved there. How much money should the state government be placing into UVM, etc. Okay, a whole lot of issues. The point that I'm making here, and I repeat the point, is that if one wants to talk about the issue of public subsidization of the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, if, for example, the governor or the state legislature says, well, we put $6 million into the UVM medical school, okay, it's a subsidy for medical education, and one can debate whether that is a good or bad approach, utilization of tax money. One could also make the question is, should the medical center be subsidized by state government? Because all the people in the state of Vermont, or most of the people, enjoy the benefits of that institution. The point that I am making is, it seems to me absolutely unfair that one city, we certainly benefit from the location, but so do other communities in Chittenden County. So do communities throughout the state of Vermont. So do communities in New Hampshire and New York State. That's where the debate might begin. So if we want to talk about public subsidies of health institutions, let us look at it in a more comprehensive manner than saying, well, it happens to be located in the city of Burlington, therefore you Burlingtonians, despite your ability, your wealth in providing that subsidy, you're going to have to do it. That's the concern that I have.
Would you campaign against, if there were a public referendum, would you campaign against them being raised to tax exempt status?
That's a little bit premature. I mean, I think we'll have to see how that evolves. Certainly, I would say that if there's no change in the attitude of the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont to this community, I most certainly would. Let's be clear about this, and let's understand that for 6 years we have talked, and I would guess even before that I was mayor. I mean, it shouldn't only be thought of me. For years, government in the city of Burlington has gone to the medical center, certainly within the last 6 years, and said, we are spending significant sums of money that we don't have to provide you with the fire protection that you need, the police protection that you need, the snow plowing capabilities, and all the other services that you get. What the medical center has said over and over again, so what? We don't have to pay, we think we don't have to pay, and we're not going to pay. End of discussion. We think that that attitude is arrogant and is wrong.
So are you saying then the bottom line is that unless they come up with some kind of contribution to the city, some sort of settlement, you would definitely campaign?
Well, I think, Bob, the point that I was trying to make is I think that the process is a good process. In other words, if the medical center were to reach a position, and it's much too early to talk about that made sense to the people of the city of Burlington, I think the people of the city of Burlington might very well support that position. If their position remains that, hey, we're not going to pay one nickel and we want low-income homeowners to subsidize our operations, my guess is that they would not be able to carry the day. So I think we have to, it's absolutely premature to talk about the nature of what that debate will be. But that would be my initial viewpoint on it.
And I was listening to a talk show this morning, and it was overwhelmingly, in fact, it was 12-0, with people very much criticizing you for making this move. And the general feeling seemed to be that this is going to do nothing but add more cost to patients' bills. How are you going to deal with that public perception?
Well, first of all, radio talk shows do not necessarily reflect, in fact, how people feel. You will recall,
one person.
Mark, if radio talk show polls reflected how people feel, I would not be sitting here today as the mayor of the city of Burlington. What might be a better indicator is to remember that a year and a half ago, when we placed this specific question on the ballot, 60% of the people voted to do away with the tax-exempt status. That was a far larger sampling than what one talk show seemed to indicate. And again, I think that there is confusion, and I think that's an issue that we're going to have to deal with. The cost of health care is skyrocketing in the United States of America. It is a national problem, it's a state problem, it is a community problem. How do we deal with that problem? That's a real issue, and we intend to address that issue as a city government. But to say that low-income homeowners in the city of Burlington, working people, should subsidize that medical center, and that is the best way, the most appropriate way to keep the cost of health care down, that to me is nonsense. We don't even know what they do behind their closed doors. We have no say as to whether or not they're going to be expanding their facilities by $60 million. We do not know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars physicians earn. We have had no say about the new technology that they use. Those are all important factors in determining the cost of health care. So to say that one simple aspect of the problem is the cost of high health care costs is not correct.
Is this a political move by the city? You're talking about it as if it were. You're talking about the theory behind it and the fact that the city shouldn't be supporting an institution when it's regional and you know, it has an obligation to pay for services and all the rest of that. Those are political arguments rather than legal arguments. Are you saying that essentially this is a political issue and that you'd be willing to settle for something other than...
No, I think the point that I began with was to say that legally, if the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, under state law, is supposed to pay taxes in the city of Burlington, it would be absolutely irresponsible for city government to say, you don't have to pay taxes. It would be irresponsible, and in fact, we would be liable to a lawsuit from a citizen who would walk in here and say, my taxes are too high because the Medical Center Hospital, which should be paying taxes, is not paying taxes. We would be subject to a lawsuit.
But then why did any of these other arguments matter? Why isn't your answer to everything? Well, look, the law just said that was supposed
I began my discussion precisely with that. That's correct. And you know, it's an interesting point. The Board of Aldermen and myself very often have to deal with painful problems. I think many of the media has observed that we're poor people who really cannot afford to pay higher property taxes. Walk into the city council chambers and they say, I can't afford to pay more in property taxes. And without exception, all the members of the Board of Aldermen and myself will say, you know, we're really sorry, that's really bad, but the state law mandates that we don't have the power to say, you don't have to pay, but you do have to pay. You can't run a system like that. So I think the first point that I began with by saying is that according to our city attorneys, state law mandates that the medical center must pay taxes unless the people of the city vote otherwise. So that's the important point. Now, having said that, the next point that I think not inappropriate for me to raise is what is my view on that? Okay, but regardless of what my view was, if I believe that under no condition should the medical center pay taxes, but if the lawyers tell us that they have to pay taxes, one would be obligated by law to go forward in that direction.
Does that mean the city's obligated to go forward with this and could not settle? Does that mean that...
No, I don't believe that is, I mean, I think when you're talking, I don't know the answer to your question specifically, but you're talking about the possibility of a compromise.
Right.
I think let time weigh on that discussion, but I would suspect that if the people of the city support something, if they vote positively for perhaps a compromise, that probably would be acceptable. But that's a non-legal opinion.
You would put it on the ballot, then you're saying?
No, that's too early really to get into. I think.
Would you like to see a referendum?
Well, my guess is not whether I would or would not like to see it. I think what you're going to see, unless I'm very surprised, is A, the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont fighting this thing legally. I think they've indicated that they're going to do that. That's not a surprise. If they lose, then their options are two, either to simply pay the taxes or to go before the people of Burlington and make their case as to why they should not be paying those taxes. So that's not my choice. That would be the medical center's choice. If they chose not to go forward for a referendum, then they would be obliged to pay taxes.
Why, on such a major policy decision, did you not inform the Board of Aldermen about what was going on?
Well, I think in general the Board of Aldermen has an understanding of our feelings about that issue. This is an issue that the assessor of the city of Burlington is obligated to bring forward. In fact, it is not a city council decision. It is the assessor's judgment as to who is placed on the tax rolls, and that was dealt with in that way. The Board of Aldermen does have today, a copy of the legal opinion.
Well, several of them were a little bit ripped that they didn't know about it, felt that it was a major policy decision.
Well, it is not a major policy.
You're the one who was there to look into it.
Yeah, but that decision ultimately then will rest with the assessor.
But isn't the decision to go ahead and take legal action something that you...
No, we are not taking legal action. It is the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont that will be taking legal action. We have placed them on the tax rolls.
Is it coincidence, Mayor, that well established, you'd like to see the hospital make the payment to the very police, so they formulated all these political arguments, that this legal opinion comes in, it's really hard to believe.
Well, I think what the lawyers told you, I mean, it is no great secret that I have problems with the state legislature itself forcing communities around the state of Vermont, whether it's state-owned property, whether it's the university, whether it's the medical center, whether it's state-owned forest, forcing communities to subsidize services for that without compensation from the state. I think I've been making that point for a number of years. What has happened recently, and I think the lawyers discussed this yesterday, is that there have been recent decisions from the Supreme Court of the state of Vermont which seem to indicate that institutions providing health care cannot have tax exemption without a positive vote of that community. And those Supreme Court decisions obviously were very influential in having us move forward at this time. If we felt that we didn't have a strong legal basis to make the claim, we would not have done it.
Yeah, but I guess my question was, do you recognize that the perception that you're using a legal interpretation for a political motive may be for you a political risk?
Well, I have to deal with political risks, but our city, I am very proud of our city attorney's office, and I happen to believe that we have one of the best city attorney's office in New England. They would not go forward and make an opinion on which their names are attached without a strong belief in the appropriateness of that opinion. I do not go and would not go to any attorney of the city of Burlington and say, look, this is what I want you to do, fabricate some legal argument and go for it. That is not the way we do business.
Can you tell me why, in simple terms, why what you're doing is in the best interest of the average citizen? I'm not talking about the low-income person in Burlington. The average guy out who has an apartment in Burlington. Why is what you're doing in their best interest?
I think what we are doing is in the best interest of the people of Burlington because it will create a fairer tax system within the city of Burlington. I think that it is wrong that the taxpayers of the city of Burlington alone should be forced to subsidize the operations of a very large institution which provides services to people throughout the state of Vermont New Hampshire, and New York State. And I think by having the medical center contribute to the costs of running government and our educational system, what it will of course mean is lower taxes for the average taxpayer in the city of Burlington, and basically a fairer, more equitable system. That's why I think it's appropriate.